Hi, this is Miss Slitton, and this is an honors bio review at lunch. Say hi with your mouth full. Okay, good. So we are reviewing the immune system. First thing I want you to remember is it's extensive for sure, but we had three purposes of our immune system, if you recall. One was to absorb excess tissue fluid at the capillary beds, which is really awesome because by absorbing that excess tissue fluid, we have the ability to monitor that fluid before it gets returned to the circulatory system. Where does the monitoring of that fluid take place? In our what? Lymph nodes. Good. Second one is you produce lymphocytes. Your lymphocytes are your B and your T cells. Okay? And technically, your killer T cells, those ones that they kind of drop out of the spool of thymus, remember those? Those are technically lymphocytes as well. Okay, so to produce lymphocytes, and number three, and this is the one that most people forget, is absorbing fat in the lacteals of the small intestines. Okay, absorb excess tissue fluid, produce lymphocytes, and absorb fats at the small intestines. So if you didn't absorb that excess tissue fluid, you would have edema. We talked about that. Here at your lymphatic system, you can see that exchange. Hi, sweetheart. You can see that exchange, and when excess tissue fluid is put in your lymphatic system, it's technically called what from here on out? Lymph. Good. Now, turn this a little bit. We talked about the way that your lymphatic vessels work are similar to the way your veins work, right? So your veins have what in them? Valves. And then what pushes against them? Muscles, which forces the fluid through it in a one-way direction. We talked about the primary and secondary organs of the lymphatic system. The primary organs of the lymphatic system is your bone marrow and your thymus gland. Now, your bone marrow is your originator of all lymphatic cells, okay? But what else happens in your bone marrow? That's where something matures.
B cells.
B cells mature, which are part of your antibody-mediated immune system. And then T cells mature in the thymus gland. That's why your bone marrow and your thymus gland are your primary organs of the lymphatic system. Now, secondary ones are things like lymph node and your spleen. Your lymph node filters tissue fluid, whereas your spleen filters what? Blood. And then we talked about other things as well, as like your appendix, or there's Peyer's patches in the intestines. When we look at our bone marrow, a lot of things that are non-immune system come from the bone marrow too. So you see over here like a myeloid stem cell, we get red blood cells. What's the job of a red blood cell? Carry oxygen, platelets, blood clotting. These are part of the police force, right? And then over here, a lymphoid stem cell is making your B lymphocyte, your T lymphocyte, and those natural killer cells, right, are doing that killing. We said lymph node filters your tissue fluid, spleen filters your blood, but you have things like your lymph nodes as well. Okay, so that's the setup. Now let's learn what's the process. Process one is, let's just keep things out of our body that is foreign. So what do we use to keep things out of our body? Primarily your skin, okay? So skin does a great job of keeping things out. And where you have breaks in your skin, you might have things like antibacterial secretions to keep the bacteria down, or like low pH in your stomach, or maybe you have hairs or wax to trap things from getting in your body. However, once something gets in, how do you know it's not supposed to be there? And that's because your cells read the surface markers, and those surface markers are called antigens if they trigger an immune response. So the surface markers on a bacteria, a virus, or anybody's cells that are not your own would be considered antigens, right? So my cells, I have surface markers, but they're not hurting me. But if I put my cells in Emily would start to attack them, right? Because they're not her own. Okay, so those are called antigens. Now, who do you call in? North Korean Army. Everybody born this way, Lady Gaga, has your police force. Okay, and these can tell self from non-self but they don't get any better at it. They don't get any worse, but they don't get any better at it. They're very generalized. They just know you're foreign, and they will attack it. We learned about some specifications, though, in this police force. We know one of those cells up there, actually two of those cells up there, secrete histamine. Who secretes histamine up there?
The mast cell?
Mast cells in your tissue fluid and basophils in your blood secrete histamine. And we know that histamine is part of your inflammatory response. It makes your blood vessels very leaky. Why do I want leaky blood vessels? How could that ever help me? Yeah.
So that other eaters like macrophages can slip.
Yes, I need them to sneak out, right? And I need those, I need to get them out in between the endothelium cells. So, yeah, that is one thing. Also, it allows more tissue fluid out. It raises the temperature, creates a fever. Okay. Next, we have eaters. Who are some eaters up there that we see?
Macrophage, dendritic cell.
Dendritic cells eat, macrophages eat. They started out as monocytes. Natural killer cells kill. Eosinophils eat worms. You don't need to remember that. Neutrophils are the most prolific of all the white blood cells. Like 70% of your white blood cells are neutrophils. And they eat, they can turn on an alarm to warn the rest of your body that you have an infection in that area. Okay? Your specific immune response, these are your T cells and your B cells. So it's your specific immune response. And you really need to enlist their help to actually wipe something out. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right. So inflammation. When we talk about the players in inflammation, these are the cells we want to talk about. We want to talk about granulocytes. Neutrophils is the most common of those. The other two are basophils and eosinophils. Macrophages, which started off as monocytes, snuck out of the capillaries and then grew into great big old macrophages. They're longer lasting. They do a lot of eating, setting off of cellular alarms, and dendritic cells. These are also eaters and kind of hit cleanup through that battle of when you have an immune response. These are all part of your inflammatory response. You have pictures in your book, probably I'm sure in your notes, showing the process of all of that. If you fall and skin your knee, you're going to get bacteria coming in here. You're going to start to bleed. And so what's going to work to clot your blood? Platelets. Good. All right. The mast cell will secrete histamine, which makes your blood vessels leaky, and the advantage of having more space in between your endothelium is it makes it easier for other fighters to kind of sneak out. It increases the fluid level. That fluid level can cause swelling, which causes pain, which lets you know you have a problem, and it can increase the temperature in that area as well. You can see a neutrophil coming out here, eating, and that's what you're most prolific with. And then here's a macrophage eating and also releasing cytokines. Those are the steps of your inflammatory response. Now, you can have other things as well. Your complement system drills holes in bacteria. These are proteins that literally drill holes and make that cell so fluid can go in and blow it up. Okay, that's your complement system. And we also talked about natural killer cells, and they will just latch on to a foreign cell and kill it kind of in an apoptosis manner, or they can just release a bunch of chemicals around them and just destroy a bunch of neighboring cells around them. Kind of like throwing a carpet bomb, but you're going to do some friendly fire damage as well in those situations. Okay, that is your Born This Way, Lady Gaga, everybody has it, police force response to a foreigner. If you want to enlist your specific immune response, okay, it's going to be triggered differently. Do you remember this cartoon that we looked at? And here's a police force cell, a phagocyte, who's eating this bad guy. He will eat anything bad. He doesn't care. As long as it's foreign, he will eat that because he's part of the police force. Once he's done eating it and breaking it apart, he will expose that antigen. This is like where you cut the head off and you expose it. You say, I am looking for a virgin. Which virgin can fight this intruder, right? And we're looking for a virgin B cell, and we're looking for a virgin what? T cell, exactly. So here, it's showing this to this virgin T cell who says, I recognize that. He is now activated. Now, a B cell doesn't have to have it presented to it. Now, as long as we're talking about presentation, how will this phagocytic cell, this dendritic cell, share this? Will you share it on an MHC1 or an MHC2? MHC2, and I will help you. Exactly. So he's displaying it, trying to get this T cell to be activated. Now, a B cell is different. A B cell comes in direct contact with that virus or that bacterium. It has a B cell receptor who will bind with that antigen, and then that will activate him if the T cell agrees. Once a B cell is activated, if you recall, then a B cell will develop into two different cells. He will make plasma cells, and plasma cells secrete antibodies. Antibodies mark the specific bad guy for destruction. Remember, what's the shape of an antibody?
The Y.
The Y. And the arms of the Y are the variable parts, and the base of the Y tells you how you're going to be killed. You remember that part? Okay. It also, and it'll make a clone army, millions of plasma cells who can make these antibodies. A memory cell is not for now, it's for what? Later, for next time. And in the future, they're more easily stimulated. They don't need to have confirmation with the T cell. They're like good to go. And they will become plasma cells and secrete a bunch of antibodies. Okay? Antibodies, when they mark something, it makes it more delicious to a macrophage. This takes care of your free-floating viruses and bacteria. And that, when I go back here, okay, so this is part of your antibody-mediated, okay, it's the B cell is triggered. Who are its targets? The actual bacteria and viruses. And then how do they work? By releasing antibodies who mark that virus or bacteria for destruction. T cells are different. T cells, their target is your own body cells that are infected with this virus or bacterium, right? And they're displaying it, your own infected cells will display it on an MHC1, and you know you're done. Exactly. And when it displays it, then another T cell will come along and do cell-to-cell combat. Now, let's look at a summary of that. Okay, maybe can you talk over it? Okay. Talk over this summary with the person sitting next to you, top to bottom. Go. It should make perfect sense to you.
There are some non-specific defenses we have. Can B cells, the virgin B cell, only be activated by finding it itself? Can it be presented by a macrophage?
No, it has to have a direct contact with it, yes? Okay, how do you feel about that? All right. So now, just a couple specifications. Looking at the antibody, remember the base determines how it's going to be destroyed. The arms, right, bind to that specific antigen. We talked about how there are variations. IgG is the most common. I told you didn't need to memorize all of these, but if you've done your additional objective, I believe it is on IgE. IgE is the specific antibody related to mast cells and allergic responses. Has anybody done theirs yet? Was it?
So, yeah.
I think it was too. So you can get agglutination, clumping, macrophages can come up, antibodies can trigger the complement system, antibodies embedded in a mast cell can trigger histamine release. Now, I talked to you about T cells already. We reviewed the difference between MHC1s and MHC2s. Why don't you use this cartoon, talk it over with your bio buddy right now. One of you take one and one of you take the other. Turn around if you don't have a bio buddy and find yourself one.
Okay, so
the receptor connects to the MHC2 and the antigen, and then CD4.
Are you good? Okay. So, when you are wanting to know, if you're doing cell-to-cell combat, and you want to know who to kill and who to help, okay, it's all in how you say it. Do you say it with an MHC2 and you display that antigen? That indicates to me you've cut off its head, you've overcome it, and you're showing it to me as you are the victor. If you display it on an MHC1, I know it has overcome you. And you're displaying it on an MHC1 and I need to kill you before you allow this to spread to some other cell in my body. All right, questions or concerns on that? Who's going to do the killing in cell-to-cell combat? Cytotoxic T cells, that's one of the killers, right? Who's going to do the helping? Helper T cells, good. So taking a look at this diagram right here, look at this from left to right, see if you have any issues with it, talk it over with your bio buddy that you're sitting next to. Okay, now, last but not least, there is a Venn diagram that kind of spells that out that I gave you as well. There are pictures in your book that show everything kind of overlapping so you can see it. Now, let's talk about active versus passive immunity. So when you look at immunity, we'll take a step back. Innate, Lady Gaga, Born This Way, General Police Force, everybody's got it. That's all you've got, a disease will overrun you. Okay, then there's immunity that you can acquire. The immunity that you acquire, it's either going to be long-lasting, forever, the rest of your life, or you're borrowing it. Okay, so this is either something you bought or something you checked out from the library. Got the difference? Okay, how can you get this? You could be naturally exposed to it. You could actually have gotten sick from that disease, that cold. Somebody could have sneezed on you. You found your virgins, you triggered all your cells, you built your clone armies. Clone armies killed themselves, and you were left with memory cells, and forevermore you will be protected against that particular pathogen. Or you could have found your virgin another way. You could have found your virgins artificially. You could get a vaccination of something that can't hurt you. And you receive it, but it looks just like the bad guy, and it triggers the same response as if the bad guy had been in the room. You find your memory cells, you build your clone armies, they all commit apoptosis, you have your memory cells, you've got it for a lifetime. Passive immunity is borrowed for short term. You will not make any memory cells out of this because you never even find your virgins, because you disable the pathogen with antibodies that your either mother gave you through your breast milk or you got a shot. And if you get a shot of antibodies, they are covering the antigen and they probably never get a chance to develop any kind of long-lasting immunity because you've wiped it out because you borrowed somebody else's antibodies and you've marked everything for destruction, either from your mother or like a gamma globulin shot. Okay? Another issue we need to talk about is chemical messages. So there are messages like interleukins that amp up your immune system, and macrophages will release these, helper T cells will release these, and what they say is, let's go, let's fight. And it's like Red Bull and crack. It just triggers the rest of the immune system. I don't know because I've never had crack. I'm so glad that's recorded. And then you have interferon. Interferon is a cell that has been infected. Its probably displaying on an MHC1, and it's saying, save yourself, lock your doors and windows, shortly I will be killed, but don't put yourself in the same situation. And so it makes a cell more likely to be careful not to let a virus or some other pathogen infect them, and those are called interferons. All right, allergies. Allergies are you're responding to something, really is not going to hurt you, but it ends up hurting you because of your response. It's kind of like somebody says something, you get upset, so you pound a wall with your fist and end up breaking your hand, okay? So you end up, does somebody in here do that? And when you end up, when you do that, right, it causes a lot of problems that you didn't need to have. It's self-imposed pain. So in allergies, our immune system is like, oh my gosh, plant sperm, it's going to hurt us, and so you overreact to it. You can react so strongly, you send your body into anaphylactic shock, low blood pressure. It can even kill somebody, their allergic response. It can be immediate. It can be long-term, like later, due to memory T cells. You can end up having something like a reaction to poison ivy, poison oak, cheap jewelry, a TB test. Then that leads us to talk about blood. You can give blood to anybody who won't be angry at the blood, right? So if I have type A blood, you can give me to somebody else who has type A blood because they have type A blood. Who else could you give me to? AB, because they have some A antigens because they are AB. B blood, I can be given to somebody who has B blood and AB blood. O blood, give me to anybody. There are no surface antigens to make A blood, B blood, AB blood, or O blood angry, right? AB blood, who can you give me to? Only AB. Because if you give me to A blood, the B will piss them off. If you give me to B blood, the A. Give me to O blood, everything will piss them off, right? And so you can give your blood to anyone who will not attack your antigens. You have to be careful of tissue rejection. When you get tissues from somebody else, they're not your own tissues, you will want to attack and destroy it. And then there are those things where you attack and destroy your own body cells. And you have a disease like lupus or MS, where you're attacking your own tissues and causing them to fail as a result. Here's MS. Okay, and that is it. Do you want to do some questions? All right, I'm going to pause you just for a minute. Okay, here we go. So the 5 people that picked A, you're right, but you could also receive blood from all those other places too, right? AB blood is the most hospitable to other blood because it has both A antigens and B antigens. Number 2, mast cell secretion occurs after an allergen combines with IgE. Do you know how I remember that? E2. Okay. Vaccine is associated with active, long-lasting immunity because you will have the memory cells from a vaccine. I'm not talking about gamma globulin shots. I'm talking about vaccines when you get like vaccinated against polio. All right. I'm going to try another one. Let's see, what's this one? Oh, we don't care about that. Never mind. Let me give you another one. All right. Most of you got that. And most of you got that. You want another one? Are you done? You need to go?
Are there 2 more?
Oh, my bad. Oh, man. Yeah, 2 of you said formed from blood plasma. No, not at all. What's in blood plasma?
Gases.
Gases, nutrients, proteins, salts, nitrogenous base, hormones, vitamins. and number 4. Good, everybody got that. All right. Is there another one? I don't know. All of those are correct for complement proteins, and all of those can. All right, make good choices, study, do your additional objectives. If you're hungry, have a piece of toast, tell them goodbye. Bye. Wish you were here.